Groupie moment.
Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Kaiju Groupie Podcast. I am your host, Michael, and as always, I am really excited for this episode because I got to sit down with my friend, Danny DiManna, creator of the Godzilla Novelization Project. In this episode, you'll hear his journey from being a super fan of Godzilla and tokusatsu to being such a positive force of inspiration within this community. Danny and I had a lot to talk about, so much so I had to break our conversation up into 2 parts. During part 1, you'll hear Danny and I discuss the journey that led him to being a full-fledged kaiju and toku nerd, our love of physical media, and how all of that encouraged him to embark on one of the most ambitious projects of his life. I also feel it's important to mention that we barely scratched the surface with this one, but I believe that you, the listener, will find the conversation fun and hopefully really interesting as you get a glimpse behind the kaiju-sized curtain of the GNP. But before we move into the main discussion, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping and mention that if you want to support this show, you can do so by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. What that's going to do is put this show in front of other kaiju and tokusatsu fans just like you. I don't have a Patreon, and that's really the best way that you can help support the show and help us grow this podcast. You can also email your feedback to kaijugroupiepod@gmail.com, and if you do either one of those, I promise I will read your comments on a future episode. So, without taking up any more time, let's get into the conversation. Welcome back, dear audio listener, and with me I have my very good friend, Danny Boy DiManna. Danny, good sir, how are you doing this fine evening?
I am doing pretty darn excellent. How about you?
I can't complain. Well, I had some bad tacos earlier today. They're kind of tearing me up right now, but yikes. Other than that, I'm doing all right. I
mean, that'll ruin some days, but it's all about perspective, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's worse things. There's worse things going on right now, I guess.
Well, where'd you get the tacos?
Admittedly, I'm kind of ashamed of it, but Taco Bell.
There you go. There you go.
So they're not real tacos.
You will be lucky to live through the recording, my friend. But
and and this is somebody I should have learned my lesson months ago. I should have learned my lesson because the last time I had Taco Bell, I got food poisoning.
Oh, geez! Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But that's been 6 months ago at a different Taco Bell. I'm hoping that the same experience will not happen this time. But but of course, people listening, you don't want to hear about my horrible tacos and all of that. You want to hear from the man himself, Mr. Danny DiManna. So Danny, just to get us kicked off here, for anyone out there listening that does not know who you are, just give us a little life story for yourself, and maybe throw in some information about the work you do on top of it.
Sounds good. Well, I was born 49 years ago to a poor family of accountants, and no, long story short, my claim to fame within the Godzilla community is that I am the creator / author of the Godzilla Novelization Project, which is an ongoing, perhaps insanely crazy, ambitious, ongoing thing on my part to basically fill a void that I feel definitely exists within the western half of the kaiju fandom, and to an extent around the world, really. But I'm keeping my ambitions low right now. I'm just focusing on English. I'm one of those fans that likes to look around and see what's missing and what could exist that might bring people some joy to kind of fill a niche. And I've been a lifelong reader. I love books. I surround myself in books. And I just love a good story, and it's writing is a passion of mine. And I thought, why not combine those things and create something that hasn't existed before, which is full-length novel adaptations of all the Japanese Godzilla films. And it's exactly as insane as it sounds. But it has been a lot of fun. I launched the project over 2.5 years ago in the beginning of 2018. And it's just been an absolute blast. So in a nutshell, the GNP is a project that aims to novelize all of the films and share them 100% free online with any and every Godzilla fan that desires to check them out and give them a read.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when I first discovered you through a mutual friend of ours, Nathan, and when he told me about your project, I said, come the heck on. Like, is there like somebody out there really doing that? I mean, that's, like you said, is, if you think about it, all the material that's in these films and all the dialogue, all the nuances of some of these films. I mean, man, you've got to be some kind of special to want to embark on that journey.
Some kind of special crazy, I think. A little air up in the old noggin there, but I appreciate the compliment.
I mean, I think you're right. There is a little bit of a hole that you are filling within this fandom, but and I'm sure we'll get into that later on in the episode. But for right now, I want to focus on you, Danny DiManna, just as the kaiju nerd, uber fan of this entire genre. So where did all of this start for you?
Oh man. I know exactly when. I know it doesn't sound like I know. I'm just like, oh, let me think back. But the moment where it all began will never leave me. But it feels like it's been longer than that, longer than my life even. It all kind of started for me. I'm 27. I'm pretty young. I was born in the early 90s. And it was a time when, the 90s Godzilla films hadn't come to the States yet. And I was among the people that didn't know that they existed for a while. But my excuse was that I was in preschool. I was young. I didn't know. Round about 1998-ish is when a certain big budget Hollywood film was being readied for release. And that's kind of when little 5 or 6 year old me started hearing the name Godzilla. Like, what is that? Who is this Godzilla guy? I keep hearing about it, but I don't know. I might have even heard the name before. It's kind of one of those things where I know where my fandom started, but the first time I may have heard the name or seen an image of Godzilla is forever lost to time. Because as far as I'm concerned, I was born with that image, that silhouette in my head. I mean, I know that's not true, but that's the epic origin story I'm going with. But around about 1999-ish is when things were starting to kind of die down a little bit with the fallout from 1998 and all that. But Godzilla 2000 came out in America the next year in 2000. And it just so happens that that's the first film that I saw. Ever. That was my first Godzilla movie.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I started out with a pretty solid one. Still to this day, it's one that when people say, "Well, I kind of like to get into the series. Where should I start? I haven't seen any," and I usually say, "Try Godzilla 2000." I've suggested that movie to younger people, older people. It never fails to get them hooked as far as I'm concerned. I saw it when I was about 7 at a friend's house. He'd just gotten the DVD of the film after it had come out. I didn't see it in theaters, unfortunately. I missed it. I know a lot of people have great stories about seeing it in theaters. I am tragically not among them, but I did see it in a friend's basement. He had a projector and a big screen. And so I got to see it on a big-ish screen, bigger than the TV I owned at the time. So it was almost like a theater experience. And I had this friend of mine who tragically years later grew out of it, and I just kind of kept going on with it. But he liked the films, and he said, "Dude, I've got a Godzilla movie. You want to come over and watch it?" And I was like, "Sure." So we went over. I went into his basement. We set it all up, and gosh, my jaw like just distended from my skull and shot down to the ground. It was really it was just like an amazing moment. The Nomura attack at the beginning of the film with the fire backlighting Godzilla as he attacks.
Oh yeah,
that moment to me is quintessential Godzilla. When I think of Godzilla, that's usually the scene I think of, is just this big black shape coming out of the fiery background and the deep guttural Miragoji roar. That great update to the roar. Pardon me. You can cut that part out. So we watched most of the film, but unfortunately, me being 7 years old and not in control of how long I stayed at people's houses, my ride that day, which was my dad, had to leave, and therefore so did I. And we got about 2/3 of the way through the movie, and I had to stop. And it was painful. I mean, 7-year-old me had never seen anything like this. My synapses in my brain that had never fired before were firing, right? So I left the house like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I just saw, but it's amazing. And I went home and I must have badgered my poor mother to death, just like, oh my God, I've seen the most amazing thing in my life. It's this Godzilla thing, and it's crazy and it's super cool. And after probably way too long of that, she turned around and looked at me and said, you know, there's a lot of these, right? At which point my brain exploded again. And so long story short, a couple days later, Mom threw me and my younger brother in the car. We went to our local library, and this was back in the days when all of the movie section at our local libraries everywhere, were all VHS tapes. It's kind of like walking into a video store. It was really great. They had like a DVD section, but when I say a DVD section, I mean a section where there was like a DVD.
Like one single DVD?
Single DVD, and it was probably probably You Got Mail or something. I don't know. It was 2000. Who knows? Yeah. But we went to the section with the little G card in it, and sure enough, they had a couple of the films, and I flipped through the tapes, and most of them were the Scimitar releases with that fantastic artwork. Anyone out there who's listening, if you know, it's the Scimitar VHS tapes.
Let me ask you here, because I want to make sure that I'm correct. The ones you're speaking of are the ones that have that really fantastic illustrated artwork. The one I'm specifically thinking of is the few I own, like for Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster, and there's another one that's escaping me. Is that the ones you're talking about?
It is. It's actually not. Those ones are different.
Oh, okay.
The ones I'm referring to are, if you're familiar at all with like the history of home video releases for the Godzilla franchise, Scimitar had the Saperstein package, which was Godzilla versus the Thing, Monster Zero, Godzilla's Revenge, Terror of Mechagodzilla, and off and on a few other titles, but those are the ones that most people remember. But the artwork, I mean, I actually know exactly the artwork you're talking about, and that's really fantastic and like pulpy and cartoony and really, really cool.
Yeah.
I among other things, I collect Godzilla VHS tapes.
I knew that about you, and I vaguely remember us having this conversation a few weeks back, and I think it was actually the conversation that spurred my interest in having you on this show. When we were going through and talking about all the VHS tapes and your collection there. And I just found it super interesting. Now, I'm not like, I love physical media, but I'm not the physical media nut like you or Nathan or even Elijah is really deep into that area of collecting and the fandom. So I sort of know about the releases you're talking about, but to tell you the differences between which VHS release is what, I have no clue.
It is a very convoluted world of rights issues and different covers and sometimes different cuts. Like if you want to go watch Gigantus the Fire Monster, but you want to see the version that actually has the Gigantus the Fire Monster title card, because all the DVDs and such have Godzilla Raids Again printed on them. But if you want to see that original version, the only way to see it is on the old VHS tape. They only released one in two variants, but that's neither here nor there. That's an entirely a different discussion. But they had. I highly recommend getting on Google Images and just looking up Godzilla Scimitar. And just looking at that artwork, you'll probably recognize it. It's fantastic artwork, thoroughly inaccurate in a couple of places, but really just excellent artwork. And the cover that caught my eye was the tape that had the movie in it that they called Godzilla versus Mothra, but we'd know it as Mothra versus Godzilla 1964. And that became
I remember these. Oh my god!
You know the one I'm talking about? Yeah.
I googled it. I googled it.
Oh, you're looking at it now? Yeah.
I am. Oh boy, yeah. Like the one that so I have these somewhere. They're at my parents' house. I know I have Godzilla versus Monster Zero. I know I have that one because I remember thinking to myself, that is not what King Ghidorah looks like.
It is not. It's a great rendition, but it's not quite accurate. Yeah. And I remember they had that tape there as well. They had a few, but the first one I saw was Mothra versus Godzilla. And then my younger brother saw the one with the cool dragon on the front. And we each got to take one home that day. And the one that I picked was the one we watched first. And lo and behold, the kaiju opus, the masterpiece that is 1964's Mothra vs. Godzilla, became the first Godzilla movie I saw from beginning to end. My first one. What a great one to start with. And then after that was Monster Zero. That's a twofer. Like those are two of the best. And I got started right off the bat pretty good. And after that after those two movies plus Godzilla 2000, that was it. That was it. So Mom, if you're listening, this is all your fault.
Now, I have a very similar story to you where I can blame my mom too, because my very first Godzilla movie in theater, my very first Godzilla movie in theaters was 1998, but my very first Toho Godzilla movie was Godzilla 2000 in theaters, and it was a magical time in young Michael's life at the ripe age of 13. My mom was in the mall shopping. I didn't want to go shopping, so I went to the movies instead. And it just so happens there was a Godzilla movie on, and I knew of Godzilla. I grew up with Godzilla. So I thought, okay, this sounds like a way to kill a couple of hours. So I'm going to go in here and watch this movie that I've never seen before. And it was wonderful because I was literally the only person in the theater.
Oh, the whole gosh. Time. You got, dude, that rocks. That's the best.
Like I'm thinking to myself, why am I so privileged right now to have my own private viewing of Godzilla 2000?
What deities did I please today? Like how did I get so lucky? That's a great story, man. That's really good.
Yeah, for sure. And that surprises me a little bit. 7-year-old Danny got hooked on Godzilla. Got hooked on Showa Godzilla. Now, at the time, to be fair, that's really because I'm 33, we're close in age. So at the time, Showa Godzilla was really the only thing we were getting over here in the West.
That's about it. Up until, 1998 specifically, there were, none of the 90s films had come over. It was pretty much just the first 17 films, but even then it was pretty spotty because throughout the 90s, specifically up until 98 when ADV released it, Destroy All Monsters was basically a lost film in the United States. It was it's kind of hard to think about it now because you can just watch it wherever you want to now. It's everywhere. But
yeah, to me, Destroy All Monsters was a myth. To me, I'd always heard of it. I'd heard that there was this magical film somewhere in the ether where all of the Godzilla monsters fought each other in one movie. And I thought, where is this movie? Why haven't I seen this movie? I don't believe it exists because I've never seen it. And because it didn't come on local television, it doesn't exist to me. So
they didn't air
I guess it does. I guess it's just not out there.
And then, I ended up finding the movie on tape a few years after its release. Because my Godzilla fandom was basically entirely built on the act of going to my library, renting a handful of the movies, watching them 89 times, and then bringing them back. But again, at the time, it was a very limited slate of movies. My my library pretty much only had the Scimitar tapes, and then they got a couple of the Anchor Bay tapes in. Stuff like Godzilla versus Gigan, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and then roundabout, oh good lord, probably 2001 or 2, somewhere in there, the Sci-Fi Channel, back when it was spelled Sci-Fi Channel. And back
the proper way, not Sifi.
It's not Sifi, not Sifi. I don't even know. I don't know. And also back when they showed Godzilla movies, they haven't done that in a hot minute. And they had this is actually kind of timely because we're recording this a few days after Labor Day. They had, and I'll never forget it. They had the Godzilla All Day Labor Day Sofathon, and they played all the 70s movies back to back, and that was the first time I saw it. Hedorah, and then they jumped to Gigan, and then they jumped to Mechagodzilla, and then they jumped back to Megalon. They were kind of out of order, but it didn't matter. Right. And of course, this was 2001, so I was able to get.
Was it?
What was that now?
Was it Mechagodzilla or Terror of Mechagodzilla?
It was a cosmic monster. It was cosmic monster. It was Mechagodzilla.
Okay, so all right, because I remember us. Like I remember a Mechagodzilla movie, like a show of Mechagodzilla movie on television, but it was always Terror of Mechagodzilla, not the first Mechagodzilla. I didn't see Mechagodzilla 74 till many, many years later.
Really? That's really interesting. Yeah, I know that the trimmed down to like 2.5 minute long version of Terror of Mechagodzilla that excised all the violence and therefore most of the plot points aired a lot back then. But I didn't actually see that one. It's kind of reversed because I saw Cosmic Monster on the Sci-Fi Channel. And then years later, I finally got to see Terror of Mechagodzilla. I didn't actually get to see that one until it came out from Classic Media on DVD.
Okay.
That was a long ways for me. But, and again, because it was 2001, I lucked out. And I got one of those 8-hour long blank VHS tapes, and I recorded the whole thing.
I remember those.
All the movies. I think it cut off a little bit of Megalon, but it didn't matter because I actually owned that one on tape. I think that might have been the first one that I had a physical copy of, aside from the 98 film, which coincidentally, that's just another one of those funny. It's not that significant, but I'll always remember it because the 98 Godzilla was my first PG-13 film.
Sure.
Yeah. And I would have been not 13 when I saw it, but it's really not like that bad. It's like, it's not violent or profane or anything like that. It's, I remember the ending made me sad when he died, but other than that, it wasn't that bad. But for a long time, I just kind of drifted back and forth between renting the tapes and then watching the ones I'd recorded. And then eventually my library, as libraries, inevitably ended up doing, got rid of all their tapes, no more Godzilla. And, and again, I just kind of watched the things that I'd recorded for a while. And eventually, a few years later, I walked into this amazing store. I'd been there a few times before, and it's a chain that doesn't exist anymore called Media Play. I don't know if you remember Media Play. I don't know if it was all over the country. I don't know the whole story of Media Play, but
I don't recall. I don't recognize that name, so maybe we didn't have one.
Maybe not. It might have been under a different name elsewhere. But basically, if you took Best Buy, Barnes and Noble, and like 3 old school video stores and crammed them into a warehouse, that's what this place was. Which basically meant it was heavenly. Right. It was amazing.
Of course. Yeah.
And I went in there and they had an entire monster movie section in this store. And I went crazy. I ended up over the course of, a couple of gift giving occasions, thanks to, again, my mom who fed my obsession. I ended up with 3 of the 90s movies, Destroy All Monsters, because it had come out by that point. And I finally got Godzilla 2000 on tape and watched the end that I hadn't seen yet. And so that was basically, it felt like it was about a 10-year stretch of my life, but it was actually like 3 years. It was like 2 or 3 years, but it felt longer because I was a kid.
Right.
And
I mean, everything feels longer when you're a child. When you're a kid like that, everything just feels like time just passes by so slow. Oh yeah. Because really at that age, you're very dependent upon your parents to feed your addiction.
Yeah. And feed you in general.
Fandom. Well, yeah, that too, but
Yeah.
that's a given. I like to say that I like to think that's a given
That's part of the
for
package.
most folks.
That's a requirement.
But the Godzilla falls into sort of the extracurricular activities category.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because neither of my parents are or were ever fans of Godzilla. They just knew I liked it. My brother was a fan with me for a while, but as he got older, he kind of grew out of it and drifted off towards other things. And the couple of friends that I knew when I was really young who were like, Godzilla's cool, like a year later they were on to other things. So I very quickly found myself rather isolated, which I think is kind of the MO for a lot of Godzilla fans. It's a very isolating fandom, I think. Like, it's very insular. You're kind of by yourself, and then you get online and you're like, oh, cool. But I mean, this was before I was online. This is before I really understood what online was. And so again, it was I never wrote into GFan or anything. I didn't even know GFan existed for the longest time. I just didn't know. And I mean, as the years went by, it kind of became one of the many, many things that I loved, because it kind of got, it was right up there, because I love a lot of things. Godzilla and Kaiju was like my bread and butter, right? But I love me some Star Wars. I love Transformers. All that stuff. That's all good stuff. And it was just one of those things for a long time. And I basically went through most of the early to mid 2000s with like 8 or 9 of the movies on tape. And I just kind of watched those back and forth, and I kept them very close to myself. And as my family, I became acutely aware that my family did not enjoy them like I did. And then I started to feel guilty, right? Like I was like, I don't want this in if you don't want to watch it. And I don't know. I like got myself into a weird mental space where it felt like I was inconveniencing my family with my with my cool nerdy passion, right? I mean, I think people tend to kind of fall into that trap.
Yeah, because I had sort of a similar journey as you, where I was a huge Godzilla fan for many years, like grade school through middle school, big Godzilla fan. And about the tail end of middle school, heading on into high school, I, like you, sort of suppressed that fandom, that little part of myself. Like, it was always there.
Oh yeah.
Like I would, when I didn't have anything else to do, when it was just me there at the house, or it was kind of late at night or something like that, and I knew I wasn't going out with my friends, I would pop in a Godzilla movie, and because I knew that I could watch it and not be disturbed.
Yeah.
And it was my own little secret. And I know it's kind of a weird thing to say.
It is, but that's how when you're younger, that's kind of how your mind interprets it. It's like, this is this thing that's mine. Right. And I'm going to enjoy it because no one will be around to laugh at it or like misunderstand or be like upset that I wanted to watch this instead of, something else. It feels very weird to look back on it and think to yourself, like, I really treated it like a dirty little secret under the mattress, but it's because it's like, there's nothing, it's pretty darn wholesome. It's monster movies, but it's kind of a weird thing, because that's kind of what it felt like a lot of fans had to do, was like, well, the monster thing is like, it's cool, but I just keep it to myself, that kind of thing.
I know. I totally get it. And even to this day, I don't always share my love for Godzilla and this fandom with everybody, because you just never know. You just never know how people are going to react. I didn't tell my coworkers I was big into Godzilla until several years into working, and my collection had gotten so big at the point it was just like, well, they're going to see them anyway, so I'm just going to throw them up on the shelf, and that's just who I am, right?
Yeah.
So
wear it loud and wear it proud.
Exactly. And it's surprising to me, as I've talked about sort of my love for this genre with other people, it's surprising to me how much people actually remember it, because I don't feel like when you're in this little bubble like we are, where there's just a bunch of Godzilla fans and Kaiju fans talking to each other over and over, it's easy to say, okay, that's cool. We all like the same thing, yada, yada, yada. But when what I would call like a normie comes along and recognizes like for instance, one of my wife's coworkers came into the house couple weeks ago. We were having a barbecue, and I have to go, and I go into the office to grab something out of the bar, and they follow me in there, and they walk into my office and are like, "Whoa, what the hell is going on here?" Right?
Yep. I've gotten that look before. I got that look a couple weeks ago when the maintenance guy came to my apartment to fix my AC.
Right. And he looks at me. He said, "Yeah, I remember that one, and I remember that one too." Huh. And it was like a really nice, just sort of passing moment. We didn't get into a big discussion. We didn't get into a big film discussion or talk about our favorite monster fights or anything like that. But it was just nice to have someone acknowledge, like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. That's pretty cool. These look really nice." And then they walk over to pick one up, and they're like, "Don't touch that."
That's very collectible. I don't want you to get your smudgy hands on it. Get your hands off.
Right.
No,
it is very expensive.
He's like, "Oh, really? This is expensive?" "Yeah." "How much?" "Like $250, bro."
Yeah.
This is, dude, let me tell you about the majesty and magic of X Plus. Because it's like, it'll get you, man. Those are expensive.
It will. And see, I've only been collecting X Plus for maybe a little over, like, I bet a year now.
Nice.
I've spent way more time and way more money than I'm proud to admit, but it is what it is.
I don't have a lot of it. I mean, it's, and we'll probably touch on this a little bit later, but like my kaiju collection is out of control. Like I'm literally recording right now in what I call my kaiju cave. And it's the second room of my apartment, which is all wall to wall, floor to ceiling, stacked with toys. I've probably got, I think at last count, I was at close to 1,000, like 1,000 toys probably. Just,
oh no.
Yeah. And
oh, God.
Hundreds more of things like posters and the DVDs and lobby cards and trading cards and books and manga and comics and magazines. And it's crazy. I'm literally like, I am nesting in my bliss, my kaiju fandom. And it's like I built a little nest around myself. And it's kind of crazy. But one of the things I don't actually have a lot of, and there are going to be collectors out there that are like, "Well, why not?" But I'll get to it. I don't have a lot of X Plus in my collection because I'd rather take that money and get like 20 other toys with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I could get like 8 or 9 NECAs. But you could until if I didn't already have them all. But whoops. Right. I have 2 or 3 Godzilla, like, nice X Pluses in my collection now. I have the Godzilla 2000 because, as previously explained, that suit is rather special to me. So I got that.
Right.
I have the 1954 Godzilla that's biting the train. That's a beautiful one.
Oh, that is a beautiful sculpt.
Yeah.
I think that was adapted from a resin kit.
Yes, I believe it was.
Well, most of them start out as resin kits, but that was a very stylized resin kit. I can't remember who initially put that one out, but yeah, I know a lot of collectors revere that kit a lot.
It's
and then
beautiful.
when when it was brought over to vinyl, all of us went nuts. Now, I missed the boat on that one, and they pop up every now and then for sale, but they pop up for a little bit higher than I want to pay for one, because I've already got a really nice version of the Shodai Goji.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
I've got a really nice one. I got the Yuji Sakai sculpt.
Oh, that sucker is gorgeous. I love that thing.
It is very gorgeous.
Yes.
It is if there ever comes a time where I have to sell my collection, that probably will not go.
No.
Because I love it so much. But yeah, my wife comes into the office the other day and I'm just sitting there working, and she just pauses for a second. She looks down at me and she looks up at my shelves and she says, "Would you like another set of shelves for Christmas?" And I looked at her and I said, "I love you."
That right there.
I have never loved.
That's what we call a keeper, folks.
I've never loved you more than I love you now in this moment. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I didn't say that, but in my mind, I didn't say the quiet part out loud, but that's what I was thinking.
It's hard to kind of quell the upswelling of emotion in that moment when someone's like, here, I'm going to spend money on enabling your collecting habit. Like, I love you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. And she says, well, we've talked about it before when I first started getting into the hobby, and she said, well, I mean, I guess there's worse things you can do. You could be an alcoholic. You could spend all your money on cigarettes or alcohol or anything like that. At least it's safe. It's like, yeah, physically safe, like, not financially safe, but it's physically safe.
Terribly damaging to the wallet, but at least it's not hurting anyone, and it's not hurting you. And it's, it's the worst thing that could happen with it is that you run out of space and it starts like encroaching on your, like, the rest of your home, like what's currently happening in my home. And or you're spending too much. But most, most collectors have a budget, and they say, okay, well, this paycheck or this month or this quarter, it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah,
I'll allocate this. So as long as you're doing it responsibly, just like anything in life, as long as it's not hurting anyone and you're being responsible, and it's not, it's fine. Just collect your vinyl.
I mean, as long as I'm not like, because I know collectors who are obsessed. They will get every single release that comes out. It does not matter what it is. They just want whatever new goodness that comes out from X Plus or Premium Bandai or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think to myself, you have got to be in so much debt. It's ridiculous. But you're right. Yeah. Everything in moderation, as long as, because Lisa and I both, we talked about that, and we're like, hey, I'm never going to let like a mortgage payment, or I'm never going to let my collection come between me and us and a mortgage payment. Yeah. I mean, because that would be irresponsible.
That's fair though. And, I feel like that's pretty
and
fair.
Insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just crazy. It's just crazy, but everything in moderation. Exactly. But yeah. I'm so happy that I've connected with somebody who has a passion for collecting as much as I do. And it's a fairly new passion. So Danny, fun. Let me ask you, as we kind of move forward here, and it's sort of a question that came up whenever I had the privilege of talking with Eric during the last episode, and he asked me this question. I thought it was a really intriguing question. So I'm going to ask you, how much does nostalgia play into your love for this fandom now? And what I mean by that is, do you love this fandom and do you love these films strictly for nostalgia reasons, or is there a deeper underlying reason why you love what we all love?
Wow, that is a really fantastic question. Well, I mean, I obviously can't deny that nostalgia is a remarkably big part of why I do what I do, but it's not what keeps me coming back, because nostalgia is a powerful, powerful thing. But if you're, depending on your mindset and the person you are, it can also be kind of a trap, because, for me, nostalgia is that feeling I get when I put in one of the movies that I grew up watching, and it feels like a nice warm blanket being thrown over my shoulders. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like it's like, I have a hard day at work or something like that. I come home, I throw in the teacher English dub of Mothra versus Godzilla or something like that, or Monster Zero. And it's like getting a hug from my childhood, But if it were all nostalgia, I feel like I'd be stuck with only those films, because nostalgia didn't propel me into seeking out the movies I hadn't seen before. Because remember, when I was younger, I only had 8 or 9 of the movies at my immediate disposal. And then when I got older, because again, for a long time, it was just one of those things that I loved in a kind of a sea of things. And then when I went to had my first year of high school, I don't remember what had me down, but something had me in not a great place. And I just needed something fun to kind of focus my energy on, something good and positive and nostalgic. Right. And I picked Godzilla because it resonated with me the most. And it was around that time that I answered questions that I hadn't known before. I got on the internet and I was like, how many Godzilla movies are there? Who's like AG Tuber, who's that now? I learned all of this stuff, and that began a kind of obsession with researching and learning and acquiring knowledge and finding the films I hadn't seen yet. And I want to say it took me maybe a year and a half or so to like get all the rest of the movies through whatever means I could. I just tracked, it was very fast. I tracked them all down. And those films weren't nostalgic upon seeing them, but now they have kind of a nostalgia because it's been, 10, 15 years since I've seen a lot of them, longer for even more of them. But nostalgia didn't play a part in me going to see like Shin Godzilla, for example. Nostalgia didn't compel me to get onto Netflix in 2017 and watch the first of the anime films. Nostalgia keeps me, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this because that really is a brilliant question. It's there for me when I need it, I guess you could say. And I love the feeling of putting in the movies and feeling, being reminded of simpler times. But that alone would not in any way be enough for me to continue watching new ones or learning about the ones that I love. We talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but in addition to being a writer, I'm also an artist. I went to art school for half a decade, and it's very a lot of my. I completely lost my train of thought.
Well, let me ask you, what was your main focus in art school?
My main focus was actually sculpting.
Okay.
Yeah, I sculpted. I did a little bit of everything, right? I did a little bit of everything, but so being an artist, I don't claim to be a particularly amazing artist. I like to sculpt. I like to do, 3D art is really kind of the thing I love to do the most. But being
like ZBrush, like I'm talking like ZBrush.
I wish. I've never used ZBrush. I mean, like actual get my hands dirty with clay sculpting. Okay. Like
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. I wish I'd like to teach myself ZBrush sometime. I'm in awe of anybody that can do that. It's just it's a great skill to have. But again, it doesn't really matter what kind of like art you're into. If you draw or anything like that, or you sculpt, there's a part of the brain, I think, if you're a creative person, that resonates with the Godzilla movies because they are moving pieces of art in front of you. Everything is in the older films, especially, of course, is hand done. The miniatures, there's an art there. The lighting, the paintings in the background. I mean, we were just talking about Destroy All Monsters, the Mount Fuji painting, that matte painting. That's beautiful. And I mean, it's just amazing. And, like the suits and making the suits, and that's amazing. And I connect with that in a really, really deep way. I connect with the art of tokusatsu in a really, because I love in-camera practical effects because it's like looking at a magic trick. It's the same. It's amazing because you can do anything with it. And I think one of the reasons that I connect with tokusatsu so much is because it's very unreal. It's very fantastic. It's I've heard it kind of compared to watching the Muppets. You know what I mean? Because anybody that watches the Muppets and leaves disappointed because Kermit doesn't look like a real frog is cheating themselves. It's true. Like, you don't go to, especially the older Godzilla films, expecting to see completely photorealistic effects. You're going to see something evocative. You're going to see something even poetic. You're not going, and it doesn't translate well for people who aren't fans outside of the United States. They see the suits, they see the sets, and they're like, "Oh, that's cheap." But it's such a deeply, remarkably, culturally significant thing. And being a fan of Japanese culture as well, that's another way I connect with the movies. In addition to loving the art, loving nostalgia, I'm also a music lover, and I think that the music in the Godzilla films is pretty much across the board just stellar music. And so I connect with the art of the music, and I connect with the actors, and I connect with especially having met a lot of the actors that were in those movies and the people who worked on them, thanks to G-Fest. Just being able to look at one of the movies and say, I now have a personal, connection to that person, having met them and told them how much what they did meant to me. And I always, whenever I go to G-Fest, I always make sure to tell the people that are there who've come from, Japan or anywhere in the world, what you did is special to me. And thank you. I always make sure and tell people that when they come. I really got into the habit of doing it in when Koichi Kawakita came to G-Fest in 2014. He was sitting on the last day of the con. He was sitting alone because I guess nobody wanted to go talk to him. I don't know. Maybe everybody that wanted to see him had already seen him on Friday and Saturday. But on Sunday, he was just sitting at his table and people were just walking past him. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, like this cannot be. Right. So I went over to him and shook his hand. I'd met him the previous day. I'd already talked to him, and he was actually kind enough to just sign some stuff that I had with me. I didn't have to pay for. I paid him, early the previous day to get autographs, but he just signed stuff and handed it to me. And I shook his hand and I thanked him for coming from Japan and for making the movies that had really had the biggest impact on me as a kid, because 3 of the movies I watched on literal repeat were Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, Godzilla versus Mothra, and Mothra: The Battle for Earth, as it's also known, right? And Mechagodzilla 2, which he obviously did the effects for those. Those films were what kept me a fan from becoming one up through acquiring the movies on DVD later and then on Blu-ray. And it just kind of got me through that. I adore those films. I love the effects in those films. And Kawakita-san is really kind of a hero for me. And I got to tell him that. And that really meant a lot. And he nodded his head and said, thank you. And I wished him well. And a few months after that, December of that year, he passed away. He was gone. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. It was really, really, it was like a getting hit with a sledgehammer, like an emotional sledgehammer. I was like, oh my gosh, like if I hadn't walked over to him, and I mean, chances are he didn't remember me, but I still got to tell him that it meant what he did meant a lot to me. So having a connection on that level to the films is really fascinating. So I guess nostalgia definitely plays a big part, but to say that it's all nostalgia is for me at least is inaccurate, because I connect with the artistic merits of the films. I connect with their historical context. I find that each of the films has a fascinating story about how it was made and why it was made. And I love a good story like that. So I connect with that. I connect with the stories of the people who made the films. I find them to be inspiring figures. Your Hondas and your Tsuburayas and your Ifukubes and Tanakas and all of those guys. And as a person who's, I mean, obviously, I'm writing Godzilla books right now, so I connect with the screenwriters like Shinichi Sekizawa. He's a hero of mine. And I can watch the films from the perspective of, I remember seeing this as a kid. It really affected me, and I have a lot of fond memories of it. I can watch it from a technical perspective, like, wow, look at those amazing effects. I can watch it from, a storytelling perspective and say, I love the way Sekizawa wrote that dialogue, or I love the way Honda shot that scene, and the cinematography looks great, and the lighting looks great, and the camera movement. I can watch it from all of those perspectives combined into one screening. So there are just so many reasons. There's so many reasons. Nostalgia is one of them for sure, but there's a lot more to these films for me than just the good memories.
Right. I think I think it's a lot. It's that way for a lot of us too. Now, nostalgia does play a huge part in my love for this genre as well. My nostalgia mainly comes from just the fact that my parents took turns during that famous TNT marathon when they had like 13 films.
Oh yeah.
New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. They stayed up, they took shifts all night, recorded all the movies for me.
Oh, wow.
And I still have those to this day. Now, whether they are in good enough shape to play or not, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I still have them. I know exactly where they're at. They're in their own little box stored away that I will probably keep for the rest of my life. And that's my main nostalgic connection to this fandom, is just growing up and having my parents sort of fuel that interest in me, because I grew up loving dinosaurs, Power Rangers, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yeah.
And so they saw that and they fed it. they fed it even more because, like I was talking with Eric the last episode, I was one of those kids that was real quiet. I didn't do well at making friends, maybe as much as my other, as my like siblings would. And I was just kind of off to myself. And so to me, Godzilla and kaiju film and films from like the Harryhausen films, they were an escape for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm completely in the same boat. I was the quiet kid in the corner reading a book. I was, it took me a long, a couple of awkward years of childhood to, learn how to make friends effectively. I'd like to think I'm better at it now that it's been decades, but it's, I was that exact kid. And when you don't have like the big friend base where you share a lot of interests, where you don't have, extracurriculars and things like that.
Right.
If you have the sense of wonder and the imagination and the creativity and it's your jam, then gravitating towards the fantastic is something that a lot of people do. Cause for me, it was Godzilla and dinosaurs, same way. And I remember at some point, I don't remember what year, trying to convince my teacher, and my history teacher, that we should watch Clash of the Titans. Because we were doing like a Greco-Roman chunk, and I came home and I said, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to try to get my teacher to do Clash of the Titans." And she said, "That's a good idea." And then I must have watched it at some point, and then suddenly remembered that there's some nudity in that film. So
just a little bit,
a little bit of boobage here and there, but I was like, I don't want to be the kid that brought the movie with the nudie shots into school and have everyone be like, "Danny, you watch movies that are inappropriate." I don't know.
Well, that's when you pick Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah. Which I actually, tragically, I hadn't seen it at that point. I hadn't seen it yet. My Harryhausen, my Harryhausen like intake was like it trickled into my life way too slowly. Yeah. But it's one of those things from childhood, but I had like maybe 2 or 3 of the movies. And then as I got older, I was like, I found another one. Oh, I'm at Barnes and Noble, and here's 1 million years BC for $5 in the bin. I'll take that, and built the collection up. But Harryhausen is, every bit as precious to me as the Godzilla stuff. I adore those movies.
Oh, for sure. They're becoming really difficult to find these days.
They are. And that is like, well, first of all, that's criminal because they're fantastic films, but they're important films too. They're very important films. I've been following the last few years, the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation's preservation efforts and their promotional efforts. Most of which have been really, really done amazingly well in the wake of Ray's death 7 years ago. That was a bad day. That was a sad, sad day. But it's been really, really cool because, again, one of the other things that I love about just these kinds of movies in general, especially the older ones, is that you got to preserve this stuff.
Oh yeah, you
got to make the movies, like not just like the puppets and the props, but you got to make the movies available. You've got to get them, most people have Netflix and they have various streaming things. Put the Harryhausen movies up there. Just get it in front of people and somebody will click it and watch it. And, it might.
Oh, I watched Clash of the Titans I think it was last weekend.
Nice.
It's on Netflix. And I was scrolling through. My wife was, she was working that day, and I was just kind of piddling around here at the house. Didn't have really much to do. So I sat down and said I was going to watch a movie, and just so happened that I saw that and I said, well, heck yes, I'm going to watch a Harryhausen film on a Sunday with nothing else to do.
It's beautiful. That's the dream right there.
That is the dream for sure. Yeah. So I want to kind of pivot here and talk more about your baby, this overarching, ambitious, audacious goal that you have had to novelize these Godzilla films. So I want to start by asking you, Danny, where did the itch to do such a thing come from?
Well, man, the itch kind of came from a couple of different places. One, it came from a place of loving reading, because I've always been a book guy, always loved books.
Sure.
The other one obviously came from a love of the material. That's obvious. And the third one kind of came from something I mentioned briefly before, which was almost like that place of frustration, because that thing that you feel really should exist doesn't. And I suppose it doesn't exist because it's a little, I mean, like we were talking about before, you kind of have to be a little crazy to even think it's possible, especially the way I'm doing it, where it's just me working on them. I mean, maybe if you had like an author, a book, you could get it done, but nobody was doing it. And it seemed very, very wrong. You know, I felt like there should be something like that. I wanted to see that in my fandom. You know, I wanted it to exist. And it's not like there haven't been Godzilla books. I mean, Mark Cerasini did his 4 books for Random House back in the 90s. And those books,
I have all of them.
Those books are phenomenal. They're so good.
They are.
And then there were the young adult books. And then obviously there's been comics from various different companies. So it's not like this doesn't exist. And in Japan, there are a couple of novelizations, and there's manga adaptations, and scripts are available and things like that. But there's never been a single unified, directive that says, yes, all of the movies need to have books. They need to have book adaptations of them that people can read. And in English specifically, maybe Japanese. I'd love, if I ever get the darn thing done, I'd love to get some of them translated into Japanese so that maybe Japanese fans can read them. But that's way down the line. That's one of these days I'll get to it. But like the initial idea for what became the GNP actually originated back in high school, a few years after I'd kind of embarked on my research-a-thon into the Godzilla films. I'd seen all of them at that point. I'd seen, because it was 2010, about 10 years ago. I'd seen all the movies that existed up to that point. This was obviously way before Legendary Pictures, before Shin Godzilla, before all that. It was the Dark Ages, where we had, like, I'm pretty sure that was the year, or before the year Death Kappa had come out. So it was pretty much just like the parody movies, but I didn't even know that all of those existed yet. It was 2010 was a big year for me, because it was the year that I went to my first G-Fest. And my parents pooled money, my dad specifically pooled money into it, and then we drove to Chicago. I mean, I'm in near Toledo, Ohio, up near Michigan, so it's not that far of a drive to Chicago. Back in high school, 2010, G-Fest. Cool. I want to say that was also the year I first discovered the Kaiju Cast, which was its own little, series of revelations, because just the idea that I could listen to somebody say the names of the monsters, I don't know, something about that was cool. It's kind of hard to explain, because it's right. Kind of in your head, you're reading about it. Throughout high school, Dave Callett's The Critical History and Filmography of Toho's Godzilla series was my Godzilla Bible. I still, to this day, swear by that book. Every Godzilla fan should read that book. Dave Callett is my hero. I love that man.
Isn't there an actual book, Danny, out there somewhere called the Godzilla Bible?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think so. I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. I thought maybe it was just someone making an exaggeration.
Maybe, yeah.
I thought maybe there was something. The Godzilla, there was such a thing out there called the Godzilla Bible, but for me growing up, my Godzilla Bible was the Compendium.
Oh yeah,
by Mark Cerasini.
That's the other one. I hear that a lot. I hear more than Dave Callett's book. I hear the Compendium, and I hear Stephen and Ed's Japan's Favorite Monstar book.
I've heard of that one.
Steve Rifle and Ed Gajichowski. That book is also phenomenal. Came out around the same time as Dave Callett's book did, and around the same time as the Compendium and all that good stuff. And there hasn't been like a book like those books published in a hot minute. There have been a lot of great independently published books. John LeMay is a friend of mine. He is such a blessing to this fandom with his books. His books are outstanding. But back in 2010, I got the Dave Callett's book, used. I think my mom had gotten it for me used off of Amazon, and I plowed through that thing cover to cover dozens of times, and it just kind of got stuck in my craw that I would love to read like the original Godzilla as a book. I would love to do that. Why doesn't that exist? And I was like, well, maybe it does. So I looked, and it didn't. And I realized that for the most part, it's informational and original fiction when it comes to Godzilla storytelling in the English language. Most of the manga, I don't think any of the manga have been officially published in the United States physically. And, the adaptations, just forget it. Like there's nothing here at all. And I thought, well, that's kind of that I don't know. Somebody needs to fix that. And in my then I want to say probably 15 or 16-year-old brain, something clicked in my head, and I said, well, I'll just do it. I'll give it a try. So I mean, I was a teenager. I'd never written anything. I didn't know anything.
You were ambitious.
I was ambitious.
You were ambitious.
My ambitions were bigger than the time I had, the talent I had. And it was way too, I mean, I was a 15-year-old kid. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So, but I did, and I had kind of this, creative momentum, and in this, my burst of excitement, I decided I was going to sit down and actually try it. And I did write prologues for 2 or 3 of the movies. I think it was King versus King Ghidorah, Space Godzilla, and Raids Again. I think that was the 3rd one. And I think I tinkered with a few other ones. And actually, because what I did was I just had school notebook paper in a binder, and I just drew the names of all the movies in kanji in katakana on the notebook paper, like covers. And on the backside, I started writing the books. And I very quickly realized, 3 or 4 pages into it, that, I kind of sunk in what I was saying, like, what the heck am I thinking? Like, I'm a kid. This is not feasible. And so I threw it on a shelf, and it popped into my head every once in a while over the next few years, because I left high school, went to college, graduated college. And they were just kind of one of those things like, oh yeah, I remember when I thought that I could maybe, write this Godzilla thing, this like stupid ambitious thing that this kid tried to do. And what really kind of led to me starting it, like actually going from, I remember that silly thing I once tried to do, to, maybe I can do this, was actually my brother. My younger brother is super cool. I love him to death, and he'll never admit it, but he is also a fantastic writer. He rates a really funny film review. He's really good. And back in high school, he was he was the only person that I let read what I had written. Just these little scribblings on a notebook paper, probably just completely full of typos and grammatical errors. I don't know, man, but he every once in a while over the years, he would bug me and say, hey, remember that thing you tried to do in high school? Those were actually really good. And I would say, no, they probably weren't that good, actually. I was like 15. And he said, no, dude, they were really, really good. Why didn't you ever do more of it? And I kind of brushed it off for a while, but he kept going. Every few years he'd bring it up just kind of out of the blue and say, hey, why didn't you keep going with that? And I'd be like, well, what do you think? It's crazy. Like, it's insane. It's so much work. And I was a kid. And eventually something kind of clicked in my brain. My brother is not afraid to speak his mind when it comes to what he thinks about the stories that he consumes. Like I said, he writes a great film review, and if he didn't like a movie, he will tell you exactly what he didn't like about it and why, and he will say it in a really informative, funny way. And I
appreciate that about people.
I appreciate when that I'm able so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want fluff. I don't want somebody just to sugarcoat something. I want you to tell me your honest, brutal, even if it's just brutal honesty. Well, yeah, I want you to tell me. I'm
not going to learn to be better if you don't tell me what's going on. So, and that's kind of one of the problems I had in art school because it's art school. You have to do critiques. You have to stand up there in
Sure.
front of the room with whatever you crapped out that week, and you've got to be like, hey, check it out. What do you guys think? Tell me how bad it is. And then everyone would tell me how bad it was, which, if they had followed that up with, and here's how you can fix it, then it would have been fine. It's called constructive criticism. But all I got for 5+ years of art school, I'm not kidding, was just straight criticism. And very infrequently was I given any advice on how I could make what I had done better. And so
Sure.
I don't feel like I progressed that far in school, because nobody, I basically had to teach myself. I would look at it and say, okay, well, I'll try this and I'll try this. But my brother's not like that. If he doesn't like it, he'll tell you. And I appreciate that immensely. And he's helped me be a better creative person, I think. And when he looked at me and said, Danny, listen, bro, when you actually did really good when you we scribbled these things on notebook paper. Like, they were actually really good and really well written. I kind of had to stop and think, like, okay, he could be using this as an excuse to give me a good razzing right now. Like, dude, remember those stupid things you wrote? But no, he saw these silly little old things from high school as wasted potential in a brother, an older brother that he genuinely believed could do it. And I was just remarkably humbled by that, because when he says that kind of stuff, I know he means it, because he does, again, no fluff. And I really took that to heart. And as it turns out, in early 2018, I found myself with an abundance of free time. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I resolved that I would not think about it, because if at any point it crossed my mind that this was as insane as it is, I would psych myself out and I wouldn't be able to do it. And so I said, darn it, caution, meet wind. And I chucked it over my shoulder and I said, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. And I don't know. And the people in my life were very supportive. My mom said, go for it. My brother said, go for it. Nobody else cared. But I gave it I said, I'm going to give it a shot. So I set up a delightfully janky free WordPress account, and set about, crudely designing some kind of a logo and writing up an introduction. And I posted all this stuff, and I sat down and I wrote the first chapter for the original Godzilla. And I said, I'm going to try this one. If I can make this one sound good, then, it's the original Godzilla. Like, if I mess this up, you'll be able to tell immediately. If I can handle this, then I can handle the other stuff. And so with the encouragement of the lovely people in my life, I took the plunge, launched the site, and very quickly people started noticing it. I was really, really surprised how quick it took, because when being a creative person within a fandom, like doing some kind of fan created work, a lot of the time it kind of feels like you're yelling into a void, because there's so many, and that's not to cast any shade on anyone. It's just that there's so many talented people doing so many cool things. Podcasters and people doing fan art and people writing, fan fictions and things like that. There's just so much, and standing out is difficult, but I feel like I really lucked out, because there's nothing like the GNP anywhere. There's just nothing like it. So I had I'm trying to think of a good word. I guess advantage of was a good word, of being unique and being able to say, listen, this is the only thing like it that exists. And, it's not like I'm just throwing, art out into the wind and they might get lost. Too many fantastic kaiju artists have no visibility, which is really sad to me, because there's so many talented people out there.
There are.
Yeah. So I lucked out. And the GNP, I wouldn't say is like this huge, massive, megalithic thing in the Godzilla fandom. But very quickly, people started messaging me and saying, I just found your website and I really like what you do. I really enjoyed it. Within a couple of months, I want to say I launched in February of 2018. In June, I was contacted by Nate Marchand, and he said, I'd like to interview you about what you do. And so at G-Fest that year, I met up and with the two guys, and we did an interview. And I was like, oh my God, I'm being interviewed? Like, why? Like, what?
It's sort of a surreal thing.
It's surreal.
It's surreal. It's you go from just being like this, this super fan who is just indulging in your passion to being looked at as a pseudo celebrity or at least, or someone someone interesting enough that people took notice that wanted to talk about it with you.
Exactly. And well, I'll go with that last one, because I am literally the farthest thing from celebrity, and that's no, but I know what you mean though. It's like, it is I mean, it's, and you know, Danny, to be fair, you are sort of a celebrity within this fandom. Everyone I've talked to anyway, knows who you are and knows of the GNP. I mean, you're sort of a known entity at this point. That is, it's been really surreal to kind of see that happen. And it just never ceases to be unbelievably humbling and just really sweet. And I just love that. And I really feel very fortunate, because I feel like I'm a positive voice. That's one of the things I really pride myself on, is that I don't, just get online and complain. And I don't, I'm not saying there's not a place for a little bit of well-mannered complaining online, but there's,
it has its place. I mean, the Godzilla fandom, admittedly, I can acknowledge, whereas maybe a year ago, I wasn't seeing it because I was still fairly new. Like, I wasn't new to Godzilla, but I was new to the fandom. I was new to interacting with folks within this community that we've all built together. And so the longer you stay in there, the more you see its flaws. And a few months ago, I started seeing some of its flaws, and it jades you a little bit, it makes you jaded a little bit. But it really is really a great community, even though it is small. We are smaller compared to Marvel or DC. And,
we always will.
And for that reason, our problems seem bigger because I think I was talking with, I can't remember who I was talking with now. Our problems seem bigger because we're all talking. It was Henry. It was Henry from, it came from Monster Movie. Yeah. Our problems seem bigger because we're all already talking to each other. So we sort of already know each other's business. That's
a really good observation. And things tend to get magnified when you have comparatively, I mean, when you're comparing it to like Marvel or something, comparatively fewer voices saying the thing, which is why something that wouldn't necessarily be a blip on the radar for a larger Star Wars or Marvel sized fan base really makes ripples. When you have a smaller group of people, and no fandom is without its ne'er-do-wells, as it were. No, but but for the most part, I mean, especially if you go to G-Fest, Godzilla fans are just the most genuinely sweet people. And I think a lot of it stems from what I talked about earlier, the loneliness of being a fan. And then that feeling of every year. I mean, last year, I missed G-Fest this year, man. I wish this
would have been my first year.
This would have been your first year.
This would have been my first year, honest to God.
No.
So if I'm able to go, if they have it next year,
I hope so.
Fingers crossed.
I hope so.
I'll see you at G-Fest next year.
Absolutely. I highly, if it happens, I highly recommend it. I always tell fans, because I never want it to sound like I'm saying, haha, I'm at G-Fest and you're not, because that's awful. But I always tell people, if at any point in, if you can't go, it's fine. I mean, not everybody can do it, but if you ever do get the chance, I highly recommend it, because the feeling of walking into those doors, and it's just like being home, it's just, I mean, because last year was my 10th G-Fest in a row, and my first G-Fest began 2010. And, I remember walking in and being a little bit nervous, not quite sure what to expect. I was new to the convention scene. I wasn't quite sure, I'm an awkward 17-year-old. What do I do? And I ended up walking into the Dojo Studios room where all of the fans bring their costumes, and they film. They film little parts of like original kaiju movies with fan made suits and miniature sets, and It's absolutely fantastic. And I walked into that room. It was one of the years they were shooting Godzilla Battle Royale, the great YouTube movie. I don't think it's on YouTube anymore, unfortunately, but feature-length movie featuring fan-made costumes and the fans from the convention acting in it, and just a fantastic fan creation. And they were shooting it in there, and there was a little boy in there with a Godzilla 98 hand puppet, and I just kind of sat and had a conversation with this random like 8 or 9 year old kid. And when he walked away, I got like a genuine adrenaline buzz, because I realized that was the first conversation I'd ever had with another Godzilla fan face to face. A 17-year-old teenager, I'm not kidding, 17-year-old teenager and like this 8 or 9 year old boy who's now in college all these years later.
Right.
I mean, I don't know where he is, but nice conversation, dude. It was fun. But
if you're listening, kid from G Fest
Yes.
that talked to Danny, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. But I highly recommend going, and you'll just talk to random people. That's the most amazing thing is, I mean, I went from being, very insulated in my fandom to the point where I was, I gathered up all my Godzilla movies and, crammed them into a drawer in my bedroom, and I would watch them alone in my room at night, and that's the only way I could see them. And that's how I chose to watch them. It's not like I was like, nobody, you can't watch your Godzilla. No, I just brought them upstairs and got them out of the way.
Yeah, no one ever told me that I could not watch my Godzilla movies on the big screen in the living room or in the den.
Yeah.
It was my choice to go to my bedroom on my little 13-inch television to watch my movies, because, like we talked about, it was my thing. It was my little personal thing. And I like what you said there just a few minutes ago, that a lot of folks in this fandom come from sort of being very isolated, because if you're a Godzilla or tokusatsu fan in the West, I don't know how it is in the East, in Japan and other in Asian countries, but if here in the West, if you're a Godzilla and tokusatsu fan, you're sort of in a very, I'm going to use the word exclusive club, because I want to put a very positive spin on it. You're in a very elite exclusive club if you are a Godzilla and tokusatsu fan here in the West. And I like what you said there, that the reason some of these fans, and this is the way I interpreted it, that the reason some of these fans get so excited is because we didn't have that growing up.
Nope.
Like I personally did not have someone like you to sit down for an hour plus to talk about Godzilla. I didn't have that. And so a lot of us now are playing catch up. And I think that's where a lot of this excitement comes from.
Oh, I completely agree. The kind of explosion in the last few years that we've seen of creative endeavors from kaiju fans, like the GNP, like all of the great podcasts that have started to come up in the wake of Kaiju Cast ending. And there were obviously podcasts that were going on during Kaiju Cast's 10-year long run, but I feel like there's been so much more, and there's been, I don't know, I feel like it's just getting bigger. And that can be anything from, like little Timmy holding his toys in front of his iPhone and putting it up on YouTube, all the way to something like what you do or what I do. And that's something that's also been really great doing the GNP that I love, is that people are sending me their creative projects and they're actually asking for input. I had a Twitter friend of mine say, "Hey, I wrote a book. If you ever check it out, leave me a review." And I ordered the book and I read it and I said, "Hey, I read your book. Here are my thoughts on it." I have had people send me their fan fictions. I have had people send me links to their DeviantArt page. I met a little boy at G-Fest last year who has a little YouTube show that he does where, it's pretty much what I described. He has little monster fights with his toys. And he said he seemed a little shy about it. And I pulled out my phone and said, what's your name on Facebook? And he told me, and I subscribed to it immediately. It doesn't really matter.
And people make fun of that stuff.
They do. And it kills me inside, especially when it's kids, because I didn't have a way to do that as a kid. But even if I did, I probably would have been too nervous. I mean, I would have been like, oh, someone's going to make fun. And, like I said before, there are always the ne'er-do-wells. I've lost count of how many times I've seen like an excited fan, because this is a little peek into my psyche here. I am not a big social media aficionado. I didn't even have a personal Facebook page until I started the GNP. I didn't have one. I didn't have a Twitter. I didn't have anything.
Well, you're probably better off for that too.
I was, but I can't hate on it too much. Even though there's plenty of negativity on social media, I can't hate on it because it's been a remarkable tool for networking and meeting fans. I mean, I'm sitting pretty at close to 2,100 Twitter followers. That's insane. Right, yeah. I mean, who knew? And but
this little guy from Ohio decided one day to venture out and pursue his passion now is what I would consider sort of a pillar in this community that we built together.
Well, that's sweet, man. Thanks. That's a nice thing to say. Thank you. Yeah, it's really, really been a blessing to see it all kind of unfold and to see the positive group of people that have come forth, and the people that will share the chapters when they're posted, and people who've left nice reviews on the GNP Facebook page, and the people who've because it's kind of hard to do that, I think, because on the website itself, because you have to have a WordPress account to leave a comment. But I still get comments sometimes, and people that have probably already had the account will just pop it and say, listen, dude, this was like really good. And I'll be like, I don't know, but thanks. Because, that creative people are their worst enemy, right? Like, I think everything I do is garbage. So it's lovely. I don't actually think that. There's a couple things I don't completely despise, but it's really lovely. It's been so nice. I've never had anyone, knock on wood, knock, 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 knock. Thank God there was some wood next to me, say anything like insulting or anything like that. I've gotten some lovely constructive criticism, which I'm so thankful for. I've had people say, oh, I think that translation wasn't right. And I'll look at it and I'll be like, holy crap, you're right. And I'll change it. I'd like to get to a point where I can like send people things be like, you just caught a typo, or you just caught a factual research error. Here's a t-shirt. I'm getting close to the point where I can do that, where I can have merchandise and stuff. But it's just been really lovely, really, really lovely.
Yeah. Hey there, audio listener, Michael here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this was only part one of Danny and I's conversation. There's a whole lot more ground to cover in part two as we dive a little bit deeper and try to answer some really interesting questions, like what has been Danny's biggest challenge to transcribe and what inspired him to start the GNP. We also have a really fun treat for you guys as a reward for sticking around with us through the entire conversation. So before we get out of here, if you want to find out more about Danny and the Godzilla Novelization Project, head on over to GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. Follow them on Facebook at the GNP or Godzilla Novelization Project. On Twitter, you can find Danny at Danzilla93_GNP. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/Godzilla Novelization Project. So until next time, guys, I'm Michael, the Kaiju Groupie, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Kaiju Groupie Podcast, a podcast produced and hosted by Michael Hamilton using redcircle.com. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue this conversation, please email me directly at kaijugroupiepod@gmail.com. Also, follow us on social media by joining the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, on Twitter at Kaiju Groupie Pod, and on Instagram at The Kaiju Groupie. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite giant monster podcasts. Also, please take a moment to rate and review the show. This will help spread the word to other kaiju and tokusatsu fans, and if you do, I promise I'll read your comments on the next episode. All film, audio clips, and graphics belong to their respective copyright holders, with no infringement being intended or implied. So until next time, I'm Michael, the Kaiju Groupie, signing off.